on pot regulation. I think a lot of people have vehemently disagreed with how they've gone about doing it, but that to do it and get out in front of it is smart. But now, how is Quebec and how is Manitoba? I just want to welcome everybody. I'm Peter Armstrong, host of On the Money, CBC News Network, 7 p.m. every night. My friend here is Mark Satov, the founder of Satov Consultants, and we're here to talk about pot. Largely what we want to talk about is how we're going to transition from a black market to a grayish market, which is what we're sort of entering into now, to a legal market. The government came out yesterday and said they do plan to hit this Canada Day next year, July 1st, as the time and place that they want to get this going. So what we want from you are your questions. First, we have Ontario's come out and said what it's going to do. What are the other provinces going to do? What does this mean for small business? The opportunity to get small business involved. We're going to have somebody on our show tonight who does cannabis edibles, but is based out of Colorado, where they're a good, what are they, like 13, 14 months ahead of us in terms of decriminalization and then legalization. And so what have they learned about how to proceed? And you have, I mean, your expertise are wide and varied, but one of the first places I started talking to you around was retail.
Yeah.
What sort of an opportunity is there in figuring out how to crack the nut of pot retail?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I think it's a very, when it started to come out that it was going to be legalized, we started to think about what's going to happen in the distribution channel and what's going to happen in the branding. To me, one of the things that I'm still confused about, and, obviously we're going to have a big debate around whether, an LCBO-like body should sell it at the retail level. But what I'm hearing is that they're not going to allow much branding or much obvious branding. No. That's the part that confuses me more, because if you're not going to have obvious branding, then what is going to differentiate a supplier? If you have a certain strain, then,
well, I mean, I think
why would I buy this? Like, there are strains, and strains are both flavors and sensations. But unless the strain is different between one producer and another, why would I even, I'm just only going to buy the lowest price?
Why would you differentiate? I get that. And I think there will be some differentiation, but they're going to have exceedingly strict rules around signs and packaging, much like they have in the tobacco world. I mean, I lived abroad between 2005 and 2010, and when I came home, basically cigarettes no longer had package. I didn't smoke anymore.
And look at it now, when you're in a convenience store, you're not even allowed to see it. It's like something they hide in the back room.
We're starting to get questions, and we want to encourage you. I mean, Mark and I were talking about this before we came on. Give us your opinions. Give us your questions. This is such a broad topic, and you guys are so good about this. I mean,
but we should be clear. If you're high, we cannot take your opinion.
That's not true.
Oh, it's not true?
No.
Oh,
no.
Well, there you go.
Adamantly not true.
Look how free we are.
James Joseph leads the charge and asks, how can the government monopolize a plant that everyone has the right to grow? Which is an interesting thing, because there are rules under the legalization where I'll be able to grow my own.
Well, but everybody could also build a still and make hooch, but we don't allow them to do that. And nor should we, by the way.
But I think, and this is more the business side of this, is if we went from sort of a bunch of people that used to make beer in their backyard or in their garage to a really interesting and really creative and really successful business model of craft breweries that is across the country. I know Ontario very well. They're booming right now, these craft breweries, and they've really come out of the woods and out of the shadows and become a real force within beer sales. And they are, I think, the biggest challenger to the beer store LCBO.
80 years after we created the LCBO. The biggest issue that I think we need to address, I believe, I was telling you this on the way to the studio, I believe there's a pendulum effect here where people think we've been over-controlled on marijuana for too long, and we're up in arms that we've not had this thing legal, and now we want to go to the other extreme. And I'm a big fan of legalization, but what I think about most is I'm a dad. Mm-hmm. And when I bought dope the first time when I was 16, I bought it from a dude with a backpack.
Right.
And it was probably on mountain sites in Montreal where all the dope was bought back then. And if it had shoe polish in it or something else in it, I had no clue.
Of course.
Right?
I mean, that to be totally honest, that's still the case today.
Today, I speak to the kids who come from Western. They said, everybody buys dope from Mike on a bike. Do you know what's in the dope? You have no idea.
Right.
And so to imply that we are not going to have strict regulation around a substance that is an intoxicant. And by the way, you can't buy a slice of turkey in this country without it being heavily inspected and regulated and all the rest.
Well, okay.
And so we have to be careful. This is part of a food and drug. We do need to control it.
So Logan Wilson is on the Facebook page yelling at us already.
Good.
Because, of course we're ready. What kind of stupid question is this? Clearly, though, we're not. Because, I mean, look at Ontario's plan. They're going to work their way up from the day things are legalized of Canada Day of next year all the way through, I think it's going to take them 2 years to 2020 to ramp up to 150 distribution centers in Canada's largest province. Okay, now, in Toronto alone, at its peak, there were 110 distribution centers in these, in the cannabis sort of dispensaries.
Yep.
With no competition among one another.
Yeah.
So there is no way that 150 distribution centers is going to do anything to curb the black market.
Well, it depends.
Not a drop.
Well, it depends if you mean the black market or the gray market. So,
well, I mean, it will move. It will become a gray market the day it's legal. And
no, but I mean the purely black market, which is people buying from dudes on backpacks and bicycles, and I think that's still a big part of the market today.
For sure.
And
will be, with 150 locations across the province, there's going to be all kinds of people who are like, yeah, sure, I could drive 2.5 hours to go to the CCBO or whatever it's called.
I guess
or
so.
I can call
Is
up
that what it's going to be called, the CCBO?
The Cannabis Control Board of Ontario, isn't it? I don't know.
I didn't
Maybe
even know
that's
that.
what just people are joking
They
about.
need some branding help, but I think... I actually think it will, because I think they're going to be concentrated in the population centers. And here's the point. If I could buy a gram of weed for $10 from Dude and I don't know what's in it, or I could buy it for $13 at the store and I know exactly what's in it, I'm going to spend the $13.
If you can get there. But if you live in, not even a small town, if you live in Bancroft, Ontario, are you telling me there's going to be one of these 150?
And they love to smoke in Bancroft. But
don't say that about
no, well, they're lovely people. But here's the point. That's a timing thing. That's an interim thing. They'll eventually figure out. Because today, LCBO, we don't have too many times where you say, geez, I would love to buy a bottle of wine for dinner tonight, but there's just no way to get it. So if you sort of play...
what? I don't know what hours you work, but I find oh my gosh, I need to go up to the LCBO, rather than I wish I could go to the dépanneur on the corner and buy a bottle of wine like a normal human being, is a fairly common
I don't find
thing in my house.
I'd love to hear what people have to say. I find that there's always one that's open till 8 or 9. And it's pretty close.
You're telling me that the LCBO works just fine. He's not. There's no way.
I don't think the LCBO is a big issue. Well, we could do what they do in the United States and have liquor stores, and really that's great for Smith & Wesson, because you either have somebody who's buying 10 guns to protect it or buying 10 guns to take it down. I don't think that's the way to go. And I think that people in the liquor stores are much more likely to give my daughter a bottle of liquor when she's 15 instead of 19.
Montreal.
What's that?
You think every little dépanneur in the corner is buying all kinds of guns? What are you talking about?
What am I talking about? I'm talking about regulating a substance that should be controlled.
I want to get to Tamara Atkinson has a question. Will compassionate pricing still be available for people with lower income, especially patients, since most can't afford LP prices? I'm assuming the higher sort of
compassionate pricing. I'm not aware of how that works, but I would assume that if there's medical or other, or there's anybody who needs a script, I would guess that there's some synergy of letting them get it from the same place, and you can either pay with a script or pay with a credit card. I don't know. I would assume that's logical, but I don't think they've said that yet.
And I mean, one of the really interesting things that we're not even getting into is where insurance companies are going to come down on medical marijuana once it's legal.
Right.
And because then you have to go to the Ontario Control Board, whatever it's going to be called.
I'm assuming that to some degree the medical marijuana expense goes down, because I think some people get medical marijuana more to avoid stigma and perceived legal issues than just finances. So there's some people who don't need medical. And by the way, I think actually the pot market goes up when it's legal, because I think people who smoke today are going to continue to, and some people who just think it's too crazy because it's illegal are going to start to.
But don't have a cell phone for the guy with the backpack that you're talking about. And they're like, I'd like to smoke a joint every now and again, but I don't know where to find it, so I'm gonna just watch Netflix. And
I know where to find it. Right down the street.
Right down the street.
Or online.
At the new LCBO
or
whatever we're going to call it. Well, and interestingly, the CCBO, or whatever we're going to call it, the Cannabis Control Board, is going to offer online sales.
Yeah, I think it's weed.gov. I think that's what they're going to do, right? But I'm also assuming that government or not, that if you are opening a new retail establishment and network by 2020, you're going to do it in a way that is commensurate with our times. You're going to have speedy delivery. You're going to have a plan that makes sense. Now I realize that's a lot to assume for government.
It's an awful lot to
But
assume.
I don't actually think that LCBO is a terrible place. I think they have union issues. But if I look at their marketing and if I look at the experience and I look at the accessibility, I actually think it's great. I think they have big stores, they have small stores, they have subsets, and there are lots of other places to buy wine as long as LCBO controls it. So I think the CCBO should do the same.
We're going to
sounding rather left wing for my
You're
brand,
being
but
weirdly left wing today.
Listen.
I'm thrown by this.
Yeah. Okay.
Trevor Best says the provinces and law enforcement are purposefully dragging their heels. It's a long time. It's long time to end the prohibition. He's saying that it should
We
be
agree.
ended a long time ago. Well,
no
but
argument.
interestingly, police forces across the country have spoken to the Liberal caucus about this and said, "Listen, we're not ready." And part of the argument in favor of a sort of provincial control board, whatever it may look like, and the many, many drawbacks that I think it has, is you need to be able to maximize the tax revenues, because if we are going to put in a whole host of brand new regulatory approval systems, people to police that, there's a whole new body of work that needs to be created as a result of this to build up the regulatory scaffolding around this thing that's going to cost all kinds of money.
But I'm assuming that as long as we have good memories, we'll remember how much we saved from policing this. In the United States, today I found a stat. In the United States, they spend more money prosecuting for marijuana crimes than all violent crimes together.
That can't be true. How is that possible?
Listen, I read it on the internet.
It must be true, then.
And so you're going to start with a giant savings from... Now, by the way, I think we already in Canada police less than they do.
And there's been a bit of a crossfade on that.
Yeah, of course.
We've moved away from
But generally speaking, we should have a bucket of money, because it's going to cost less to police a distribution network than it is to police all these dudes on bikes.
But the problem
with
is
backpacks.
if we say you can't just sort of grow it and sell it and build a dispensary on like a mom and pop store on the corner, then we still do need police out there cracking down and doing those flyovers.
By the way, I'm not even saying you can't grow and sell it. I'm saying you can grow it.
You can't grow and sell it.
What I'm saying, but the LCBO, right? You can sell alcohol as long as you sell it through them. So as long as the LCBO knows who is selling it.
These craft breweries that I was talking about earlier, they can take their product to the LCBO. You got to fight to get it on. You often have to pay to get it into the...
And you could even, like the SAQ's model is actually a little bit better than the LCBO, because they will store it for you on consignment, they will ship it for you, handle the distribution.
Because they have competition locally on the local corner store. You can buy a bottle of wine. You can buy
So what you're saying is SAQ is a little bit more flexible because their competition will take them out if not.
Right.
But that is a tweak to the system, as opposed to saying that we should just let everybody have at it. Here's the question I want to ask you, Peter.
Okay.
When your children are 17 years old,
right,
and they're going to smoke pot,
right,
where do you want them to buy it?
Oh, listen.
That's the question.
And I believe 17 years from, or 10 years from now for my eldest, much of this will have been sorted out. I think we're in a particular problem, both on coming up with the money to pay for the regulatory body that's going to govern this, and also just the handling, the emergence from a prohibition period that we have a model for, right? And a lot of Canadian companies, Seagram's, a lot of these companies were involved in that. We know the history of
by the way.
Well, no, the Seagrams weren't. I mean, okay, you're right.
Come on.
The issue, though, is that we saw a transition, a legitimization of, in some cases, criminals saying we're more profitable to go legit. We're more profitable to become a tax-paying, let's do it. And they went for it. They were like, we were criminals because the prohibition system wouldn't allow us to do the business we were in.
One of the things I think they need to control against, and I realize we're talking a lot, we should hear from our guests, but
we're gonna get
one of the things I want to control against is there was a period in Montreal, and maybe in Toronto, but I was living in Montreal all the time, where everybody went to the First Nations reserves to buy cigarettes.
I remember that.
And that's because...
People still do that.
Right. And that is, to me, poor pricing, because that's all about managing the gap.
Right.
If it's very expensive on the street and very inexpensive at the reserves, you're going to do that. They need to manage the gap. The way to get rid of the black market is to manage that gap to make sure that it is worth it for the people to spend the extra couple of bucks.
But I come back to my point of accessibility.
Yeah.
If you have to drive 2 hours to get to that place, then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Anyway, let's hear from them.
There's a YouTube viewer who says, we need to get cannabis from pharmacy, like all other medications, and pharmacy to endorse the use of testing strips for fentanyl in illegal drugs without judgment. It's I don't know if you want to jump on that.
I don't feel it's a drug, by the way. I feel it's like alcohol more than it is like another drug.
Right.
And so I mean,
it gets a bad rap because I think there is an argument behind that notion that it was what's it called, a leapfrog drug that sort of gets you into the next round, largely because the guy that you bought.
Oh, you mean gateway
drug.
Sorry, yeah.
The guy you bought pot from happened to sometimes also have, pills or coke or whatever.
I was talking to somebody in my office, and we were talking about people who sold dope. I think the hypothesis is that there are people who just sell dope.
Right.
And there are people who do both. And I think there are people...
By dope, do you mean pot?
Yeah, sorry. When I say dope, I mean pot or weed or hash.
Right.
And when I was young, which was
I think the kids use that term differently now.
Oh, okay. Oh, they say dope.
No, I think that dope is like the harder stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
anyways, move on.
When I was young, there were people who you would know, and I'm sure you knew people like this, who would just buy a brick of hash for the summer and slowly take bits off and sell to their friend. And they're not really a drug dealer, but they're certainly not going to show up with meth or ecstasy the next day.
A guy went to university, went to jail for doing that.
Yeah, well,
legit jail.
Is he out yet?
As a viewer on Facebook who says, I won't buy my cannabis from the Ontario government-controlled stores. I'll continue to buy from a Vancouver dispensary, which raises a really interesting question. We had a dispensary owner who was on this show on Monday or Tuesday, I think Monday, who was saying, look, we built up this industry. We built up the demand. We lobbied the government. We pushed for this. And now the Ontario government says we're going to come in, we're going to shut you all down. There is a question of fairness about that.
There is a question of fairness. I would say it's the opposite to the taxi issue, where the taxi companies built the infrastructure and did everything, and if the government didn't come in to save them, why are they going to come in to save these other people?
Fair enough.
And listen,
that's actually a really good point. I haven't.
And by the way,
thought my way through that.
I am being a little bit of a long-term thinker in the sense that I'm minimizing the short-term thing. I sort of feel like in 5 years this will all work itself out, and it is the right thing to do. I'm not trying to give the impression that I think the next 2 or 3 years will be easy. There won't be some accessibility issues. I'm just saying eventually it'll all be fine. Smoke a joint, relax.
I think I largely agree with you, but I think this transition is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
I think there are businesses that will go under that invested in under the assumption that when you legalize a thing, you wouldn't then still regulate it to the extent that Ontario
However, the other thing I would say is, you were doing something illegal, you invested in it, you didn't get caught.
No, with the promise that it was coming, though. Right? They said we're going to legalize marijuana. That's when we saw the explosion of dispensaries in Toronto.
Yes, but
then we started raiding.
But they made assumptions of their own free will. They didn't get a government person to say, go ahead and do it, this will be fine. They said, I'm going to do this, and until you stop me, I'm going to keep doing it, and now you're actually saying something different than I predicted.
Go back to the Uber model. We said, okay, well, since you've broken the law, but people like it, we're going to make sure, you know what I mean?
Fair enough,
it's picking one way or the other. Marissa Dezotti says, my concern as an HR professional is having employees come to work high, which is a very common concern. I hear that from a lot of people. How does that play itself out?
So at my company, I say, you want to smoke a joint on the weekend or at night? Have at it. Even before it was legal, I didn't really care. But God help you if you show up to this office stoned, because we're here to work.
Right.
And I do think there's an issue. I'm not sure if that issue changes where you sell it, because alcoholics come to work drunk all the time.
Totally. And I mean, there's the person
I hear her concern. I just don't think it's related to
at lunch that doesn't come home drunk, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a balance there. And
don't you think, though? Don't you think that weed is different than alcohol in the sense that when you smoke a joint, the purpose is intoxication, it's binary, whereas when you are drinking alcohol, you know, it's with friends and you're having a glass of wine, you don't expect that you're going to get drunk as much as enjoy the sensation, the flavor, and whatnot.
A glass of wine has a demonstrable impact on...
on me, for sure. I'm a lightweight, but...
No, but you're saying you're choosing wine as opposed to Perrier because why, then?
The flavor. You think I'm wrong? I'm fine.
Well,
Again,
maybe you're not, but I think a lot of people... A glass of wine takes the edge off at lunch. And
Fair enough.
I'm going to go have a glass
of wine.
I'll buy that.
It's going to be good. I will concede to that. I'll buy that.
Look at us agreeing.
It's amazing.
David Brown asks, can the government outcompete with the black market if they don't allow a competitive, legal, independent retail market? I guess what they're saying in Ontario is they don't need to. They're not going to bother competing with the black market.
I think, by the way, in my mind, maybe the black market is the dudes with backpacks and bicycles. The gray market is cannabis culture, and the other market is the dispensary. Like the sort of
cannabis culture being.
And I think we should obviously legalize, get really good at our own retail model, kill the black market, and we'll do that by market forces because I don't think it works. And I think we got to figure out what to do with transition. Maybe there is a plan where they become satellite government-sanctioned places in the long term.
Well, and I mean, you're not a lawyer, neither am I, but I do wonder if you're in some town in Ontario, say, I'll pick one of the, I talked about Bancroft earlier, say Minden, Ontario, where there's not going to be one of these 150, and you
That's a great
either
idea.
want to buy or you want to sell, could you go to court and say they're refusing to put in here?
But that's where a creative consultant, if the government hires one, would say, do what they do in Minising. So we always stop on the way to the cottage at this great large convenience store in Minising, and in the back
They've got the beer stores.
They have a 3-row LCBO.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you think about that, like if I am a store that exists today, why couldn't I do that? And by the way, Shoppers Drug Mart has many Canada Posts.
Right.
So there could be a model like that.
And Loblaw. I mean, here's the other interesting stat is you have 150 locations coming through the province of Ontario. They approved more grocery stores to sell beer and wine throughout the province than, you know what I mean? Like,
There's a little bit of an intangible of Loblaw, we're starting this, let's grab it and make sure we know it, and then over time figure out how to sort of work it around the edges. But I think there could definitely be a model where you sanction other places to do it.
Eric McFarlane has a question just for you.
Just for me?
Do you think a government monopoly in Ontario will A, drive up prices, B, disappoint consumers via bad locations, store hours, or in-house services and knowledge? How is the customer experience going to be?
I will say this. I always have a great experience at LCBO. There's always someone to serve me. They're always knowledgeable.
Very good.
They're very friendly. They always get you to swipe the Air Miles card.
Though, I remember the time, I can remember going to LCBOs with my father, and
it's on the horse and buggy right after Prohibition.
No, this is like the late 70s, I guess. And he had his card that he'd fill out and hand to a guy in a white lab coat who would go back and get his bottle of
Fair
gin
enough.
or whatever
but today here we are, and we've learned from the LCBO.
Look at how long it took the LCBO to evolve from that.
I guess what I would say is I would be hopeful, Eric, that we would sooner get to a place that we are with the LCBO, because I think the LCBO does a good job serving consumers, and I think pricing is a decision that they need to make about the gap between the black market, because the consumer needs an incentive to be legal.
Right.
And then take the profits away from the black market.
Here's a good retail question for you, because the math on this is interesting. The average price per gram on the streets right now is $5. This is Drone LeBron who asks this.
He gets it cheap. I heard it was 10.
The average price is $5 a gram with discounts by in bulk. How do you intend to match those prices if you're going to tax it? You can't. But if you're paying $5 a gram on, sort of a quarter ounce or whatever, however you're buying it, you get into your margins are going to be an issue.
Two comments. One is, what's crazy?
What's crazy?
I bought it for $10 a gram in the 90s. So just the pricing has just come way down in real terms. I always think it's kind of semantic when you buy a product from a government entity and they split between, and they sort of tell you about what is actually taxes versus not. Here's the point. The bottle of Pinot Grigio from an Ontario vineyard is $12, and I think that's a fair price.
Right.
And so I think they got to figure that out here. And I know that everybody perceives it to be a tax grab. I hope that it is somewhat positive and they pay for their infrastructure. If it's not, I still think it's a good move, because I think it's a cleaner, safer way to buy drugs, and I think you're going to save a lot on policing. And so I hope they make the right decision, again, about making the gap not that much. Because if the gap's a lot, somebody's going to be in business for arbitrage.
I'm just going to reset real quick. I'm Peter Armstrong, host of On the Money here on CBC News Network every night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Mark Satov is with us, friend of the show, strategy advisor and founder of Satov Consultants. We're talking about pot and how to proceed from here. We have a question here from Rhonda Making, who asks, how does it work in Colorado? I know a bit about that. I think you do too. But Rhonda, tune into the show tonight because we have a woman who runs an edibles company, but somebody who's deeply and personally involved in the marijuana industry in Colorado.
But but what I do know is that there are legal private dispensaries there.
Totally. And she's going to talk to us about what they've done, what they've learned over the last year and a half or so that they have been legal, and what we can learn from them. So she'll be way better suited to get at that. For you, Vanessa on YouTube says, the idea of online distribution is great, but how do you regulate who's buying it? Reminders? I guess they have stuff built in around that already, don't they?
We're going to have to get there with booze, and we are getting there with booze, and so we may as well find a way to get there.
A lot of people watching on YouTube today. That's great.
By the way, the way to do that may be a delivery. So, it's the airline.
Somebody has to sign for it.
It's the airline's job to make sure that nobody gets on the flight without a passport. So it could be the delivery person's job to make sure that nobody accepts the drugs without an ID.
YouTube viewer says, I wouldn't buy cannabis from a government store unless I knew which licensed producer it was coming from. I think we'll know that.
But it's going to be a lot easier at the government store than a dude on the corner and certainly dude on a bike.
David Brown says, would you please stop calling cannabis dope?
I'm sorry, David.
He's old. That's his problem, David.
I'm old?
Yeah. I think it used to be when we were coming up, it was called dope. Like that was dope was that,
David's
and then
younger.
other stuff was
God
other
bless
stuff.
him. That's what I
Derek
called it.
Shepard says, why not research the economic taxation laws and regulation processes in countries currently marketing cannabis? Why reinvent the wheel? Because there's like 2 jurisdictions in the world that have openly regulated cannabis. There's not a lot of like peer-reviewed data on how to run an economy.
And as a general statement in 2017, Canada has become the unofficial best country in the world to live in. I don't want to copy too many other countries on too many other things.
Jacob Short says, what about the black market for oils, edibles, concentrates, etc.? There will be a huge black market unless they're able to figure this out. The issue around edibles is one that people get very worked up about.
Yeah. But here's the story. If you're a restaurant and you buy alcohol, where do you buy your alcohol?
If you're a restaurant, you buy it through the LCBO.
At a discount, and then you resell it.
Right.
What's the problem?
No, but like I think people, mostly the concerns I hear are people saying you buy gummies and little gummy bears that have, I don't know, pot oil in them or whatever, I don't know how they make them. And there are concerns that people will leave them at home and their kids will say, hey, look, a gummy bear, I should eat that.
Yeah, for sure. That has nothing to do with where you buy them, but I think the point is today we have a system where for alcohol, anybody who's selling it buys it through the LCBO. You're a restaurant, you get a 17% discount or whatever it is. And so if you are manufacturing that, you buy the controlled substance, you blend it with something else, you sell it.
Cutest Jackson says, I can't wait for the quality controlled buds. Mold and cheap outdoor grown stuff is too common in the fall. See?
Isn't it nice
Listening
that
to
of
you.
the host and all the viewers, there's one person who sees the wisdom of my ways? I was going to say agrees with me, but I thought it'd be more arrogant. Sees that I'm right. Thank you, sir.
Wayne Marketish says, all I have to say is the dispensaries are the best option and a new business only to set up and sell. Bring new money to the economy. The Ontario model will cost too much and fail. Yeah. The interesting thing will be, I think, to see where other provinces go.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you look at Quebec, I can't imagine they're going to go this deep towards regulation given how they have a way more diversified model in their liquor distribution.
Yep.
Jim Bob.
By the way, the interesting thing is we could say that it would be great for everybody to follow Ontario, but Ontario's already late anyway, and so I think they better be careful. They can't wait for Ontario's results because then what are they going to do?
I do. I think it actually gives you an interesting opportunity. That if you leave it to the last minute, then you say, okay, free market. We're going to police you. We're going to give you a bunch of rules, but you're going to do it. Then we don't have to pay for it. Then there's an awful lot of.
What would be nice is if we did what Procter & Gamble would do when they launch a new product, is they take 2 geographies and with 2 different launch plans, and they do an A/B test. Now it's harder today with the internet.
We'll probably get that. I would imagine an Alberta or a BC will go with the A test, and Ontario will do the B test.
Let's see what happens.
Jim Bob has a really good stat here. It says it's 10,000 places in Ontario to buy booze. He says there's 100,000 places you can buy tobacco. You think 150 cannabis retailers will make a dent? Ha,
it's a good stat.
It's a good stat. I don't know that that's true, but
it rings
true.
I trust Jim Bob, but it is a good stat, and I do think it's a reminder that we better focus on the 3 to 5 year plan. The only thing I would say, Jim Bob, is in today's world, if you are opening a retail business, you're going to open fewer locations anyway because you're going to assume the internet is going to do its job. You're going to need both.
Right.
So there is
and
that,
I mean,
but that is a lot. That is a big difference. So thank you for that.
The days of the sort of Sears catalog delivery are long gone. You can get Amazon Prime, you can get stuff delivered in most major cities same day. So if we're looking at that in terms of it's almost like dial a bottle. The old taxi company brings a. Anyways. Vikesh Patel says they should have both markets and let them compete, which is your sort of point about the AB. See how they do.
Yeah, but I think he's saying have them both in the same part of the problem is that's within a market.
Well, and I mean, that's the Quebec model.
Yeah, I guess so.
Derek Oatway says, someone go ask Colorado cannabis industry how much money they just gave to the education system there. I'm sure it's in the millions.
It's a lot.
Due to tax revenue from sales, including mom and pop dispensaries.
Your guest tonight obviously will be better informed than I, but I did study Colorado. Everything is moving in the right direction. Tax revenue up, crime down, and no giant increase in usage, which is what a lot of the more conservative people were worried about.
And no giant increase in usage among sort of teenage, you know what I mean? Like the numbers didn't really skew. Now, we're only just getting a lot of those data, and we'll have to flush them out. But they're all wildly positive.
Fentanyl scares me as a parent more than anything. And reducing the chance that anything funny is going to be laced with weed is like number one on my concerns.
Right.
That has risen even greater than before, just the magnitude of the risk today.
Listen, I think there's a lot of good happening here. There's a lot of questions about how we're going to do it. And you know what? We're bound to get a lot of this wrong. I'm really glad that on our show we're having these conversations and we're trying to get informed about it and we're trying to learn from what other opportunities have happened, experiences that have been laid out, and it's great to get you in to help us sort of understand the retail side of this. Is actually I think is one of the really interesting aspects of this. We're going to wrap up, but as I say, we're going to have this fascinating conversation with a woman who runs an cannabis edibles company out of Colorado. So what have they learned? What can we learn from them? That's coming up tonight on our show, On the Money, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on CBC News Network.
David Brown, I have called this substance dope for the last time. I learned something.
There you go.
In addition to anything else,
listen, I learned a lot, and my favorite thing about these is learning from you guys and getting your sense of where this. It's really nice to get this interaction with you all. We will do this again soon. We'll see you again on the show soon.
For sure.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.